Perhaps no other tree signifies that spring is here than Yoshino cherry. In this video, I'm going to give you my tips, tricks, and hacks on how to fertilize, how to plant, how to prune, how to look for pests, the benefits of Yoshino cherries, and so much more. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to plant a Yoshino cherry. And perhaps the most important thing about planting a Yoshino cherry is site selection. So Yoshino wants full sun. That's going to be 8 or more hours of direct sunlight every day. And you need to select a spot that's big enough for it. So if you look online, you're going to see that Yoshino cherries can get up to 40 feet tall, and they get as wide as they do tall. They can get 40 feet wide. Where I'm at here in zone 8A, they don't get that big because they don't live that long. So USDA zone 5 through 8 with Yoshino cherry on that extreme southern end, they just don't live long enough to get that 40, 50 foot tall like you would see somewhere like at Washington, D.C. at the Cherry Festival or in the Ohio Valley or somewhere like that. Always find a spot that's large enough to handle your Yoshino cherry, and also look up before you plant. Once you've found that full sun area, look up. Make sure there's no power lines over the top, because here's what's going to happen. Your tree is going to mature, and then the power company comes in and they scalp the top of your cherry tree because it's getting up in their power lines. So make sure you've got plenty of space above and as well as side to side before you plant. Once you've found that ideal spot where there's no overhanging power lines and it's wide enough to handle your Yoshino cherry, you'll want to dig your hole. So when you dig your hole, you want it to be twice as wide as the diameter of the root ball. So say, for example, you buy a 10-gallon plant that's in a pot that's 18 inches in diameter, you'll want to dig a hole that's 36 inches in diameter. The reason is we want to get that backfill as loose as possible so those roots on that cherry tree can get into that loose soil and establish as quick as possible. Also, you don't want to plant your cherry tree too deeply. Cherry trees do not like to have wet feet. Don't plant these in heavy clays that stay wet all the time. Plant them a little bit high, and also make sure that the root flare is out of the ground. You don't want to cover up the root flare with dirt. That's just going to inhibit your cherry tree from being healthy. It's going to introduce the potential for diseases that we don't want to deal with. So once you've selected your area and you go to the garden center to purchase your Yoshino cherry, I want you to look for a few things on the tree that you purchase. One is that the tree is grafted. And you may be asking yourself, well, Dr. Warren, how do you know a tree is grafted? So if you look at the base of the tree, you should see two different types of bark. So the Yoshino cherry has these horizontal lenticels. It's these lines you see in the bark here. Once you get almost down to the roots, you should see the bark change. That's an indicator that this was grafted onto rootstock. So if we grow Yoshino cherry from like a cutting or from a seedling, their roots aren't as vigorous. This has been bred for ornamental characteristics, and sometimes when we do that, we lose the root structure integrity of the plant, meaning we need to graft onto something with a heavy rootstock, and that's what we have here. Make sure that your Yoshino cherries are grafted before you purchase them. Another thing I want you to look for is disease. If it's already leafed out, look for things like black spot fungus on the leaves. Also make sure that if it's got any branches that are cut off, that it's not bleeding a lot of sap out of it as well. Yoshinos tend to be very expensive. You can save some money in the long run by looking for some of these things. Make sure it's grafted. Look for disease, health issues in the leaf, the limbs, the trunk. If you don't see any, you should have a good tree. So obviously early spring, it's March here where I'm at, is the main show for Yoshino. But for me, I believe this is a tree of all seasons. And let me explain this here. So as these petals fall off, they're good for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on if we get a late freeze or frost and a few other environmental factors. They're going to fall off. The tree is going to leaf out, and it makes a fantastic shade tree. In the fall, we're going to get great fall color. So yellow leaves is actually one of the first trees for the leaves to turn yellow, And actually here it's late summer, like Labor Day weekend, this thing's starting to change colors and drop its leaves. And you may be thinking, well, that's the end of the show. But I love the branch structure of Yoshino cherry. I love the horizontal lenticels, the way the bark looks. And what I like to do to show this off year round is I have outdoor lighting at the base of these trees that shine up through the canopy. So this time of year, it looks awesome. The flowers are lit up. But even in the middle of winter, we have this unique branch structure. We have this unique bark that's being showcased in the landscape when there's really not a whole lot else to show off. Yoshino cherry requires very little, if any, pruning. There's a handful of things I want you to look for with Yoshino. It has a beautiful natural growth habit. Like I said, very little pruning required. Sometimes I like to come in and raise the canopy of the tree. Some of the limbs do tend to grow downward more in a pendulum form, and so I'll come in and I'll prune those up. Also look for places where the limbs cross each other and touch. This is going to be a place where when the wind blows, the branches will rub against each other, and that's going to open up the bark. That's a potential place for infection to occur. So if you see any branches that are crossing and rubbing, make sure to remove those. Also look for dead wood as well. This time of year, it's easy to see the dead wood. Anything that does not have flowers, anything that doesn't have flower buds, obviously that's probably dead and can be removed. Additionally, Yoshino cherries can sucker from the roots on occasion. If you see little vegetative nodes popping up from the base of the tree, you can go in and literally just pinch those off with your thumb. If they're a little bit larger and you can't get them with your thumb, take a pair of hand snips, cut them off at the base, and your tree will love you for it. Fertilizing Yoshino cherries is very simple. I prefer an organic fertilizer by Espoma. A pro tip for you here, Espoma makes tons of different organic products. They have berry tone, they have holly tone, but if you look at the guaranteed analysis on the back of the bag, they're all pretty much the same. They're the same percentages of N, P, and K and micro and macronutrients. So it really doesn't matter which one you use, but you take a couple of handfuls of that organic fertilizer before we see flowers. I do this in February. Go around and put 2 handfuls on either side of the trunk. So 1 handful on one side of the trunk, another handful on the other side of the trunk. And as your soil temperatures get above 55 degrees, how these organic fertilizers work is microbes in the soil will begin to feed on them, and that's going to release nutrients for your tree. Also, like a synthetic fertilizer, if I don't have any organic fertilizer on hand. And what I prefer is Osmocote Slow Release. So this is a product that has all of our macros in it, our N, P, and K. It also has our micronutrients. So there's 18 essential nutrients that plants need in order to survive. And it has all of them in the correct amount. It's a slow release fertilizer. It's going to feed our trees for 6 months. So we can begin feeding now. I'll put it out when it starts to flower in March. And it's going to feed us all the way until the leaves drop in September, October timeframe. An added benefit of Yoshino cherry, this is a great pollinator tree. There are tons of bees and butterflies working this tree right now in early spring when there's really not a whole lot else in bloom. This one's in full bloom. It's one of our early bloomers. The honeybees are starting to get active because it's warming up outside, and they are just swarming this tree right now. So if you want to help the local pollinators, help those honeybees out, we know they're in danger, and you're looking for an ornamental tree for the front yard, consider Yoshino cherry if for no other reason to help out the bees. If you have a tip, trick, or hack about Yoshino cherry that we did not go over in this video, please leave that down in the comments below. We're a community of learners here on the channel, and I would love to learn something from you, the viewer. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor, and until next time, happy gardening.